Age crisis. These words hardly evoke pleasant associations in anyone, but psychologists insist that these difficult periods of life are just necessary.
A crisis doesn't necessarily mean something bad. However, every crisis abides by its own laws. Any crisis during any time in the life has its own conditions. How it will occur, and this is what every person should know about. Not expect it, wait and be happy like, hooray, I'm finally having a crisis.
What crisis does a newborn baby come through? Is childhood really as a carefree time as we always think about it? How to go through the teenage years without hurting yourself and the people around? Why should you be happy to have a midlife crisis? In our film, we explain physiology and psychology of age crisis using real stories as examples. A person experiences the first age crisis barely after being born. After leaving the mother's womb, the newborn is completely disconnected from all life support systems. Within extremely short terms, it has to adapt to completely new conditions of existence. At this moment, the baby just has to survive, to activate all its physiological mechanism responsible for adaptation, so to say. And the endocrine system surely holds the leading position here. The endocrine system is responsible for the reactions of adaptation to the new environment. Roughly 100.5 hormones adjust work of the internal organs and the nervous system and strengthen the skeleton. Testosterone and estrogen are the most active. They are responsible for the formation of the genital system. During the first pregnancy months, the testosterone level in a boy's blood is equal to the levels typical of a grown man. The baby uses the resource that it gets from its mother, since it is incapable of producing most part of the hormonal components on its own. These are mostly the sex hormones. This is one of the biggest problems, difficult postpartum adaptation of preterm babies. This is because they don't manage to get their internal systems properly developed and cannot use them in full to adjust to new conditions. Psychologists call the period of the infant's adjustment to the life outside the mother's womb a newborn crisis. During the first months of life, drastic changes take place not only in the physiology, but also in the psychology of a little human.
By the way, here's a thing that I, as a practicing psychologist, consider one of the most difficult ones to break for a grown person: basic distrust of the world. And sometimes, not sometimes actually, but roughly in 60% of the cases, this basic distrust of the world is forming at the age of 3 months. At the age of 2-3 months, when the baby looks for its mother with its eyes and it demands her to come and look at him, asks her by crying, and it can't do it another way. If a baby feels at a certain point that it can't achieve anything, it will start to look away. And this is a formation of acquired powerlessness.
We are used to thinking that a crisis is a depressed state caused by frustration. Clearly, the questions of the search for the meaning of existence cannot obsess a newborn. Specialists explain a crisis is based on changes, not emotional stress.
Let's find out what a crisis is. Well, first of all, it is a collision, and any collision suggests movement. Upon collision, something happens. I believe that this is the positive role of a crisis regardless of how it goes. It is great that we go through crises, because it proves that we grow personally. There is no growth in depression. Depression is a disease. Well, watch the cartoons just for a little while today, okay? Sure, honey, for about 10 minutes, okay? Yes, do you hear me? Well, yeah, I don't hear you.
The second crisis in a human life occurs approximately at the age of 3. This is a kind of border between early and preschool ages. Parents know that this is the most difficult period of early childhood.
For example, there was a period when Varya used to come back from the kindergarten and just roll on the floor, screaming. It was impossible to stop her.
At the age of 3, differentiation of one's own self occurs. New relations with the surrounding world are established, and the desire to do everything independently appears together with negativism, negative reaction to any request from adults. Therefore, the child gets psychologically separated from parents, and the formation of an independent personality begins.
Let me help you. Hold on. Stop. Let me help. I'll get dressed myself. I understand that you'll do it yourself. Can I? All right, button it. I'll do it myself. At the age of 3, when a child has this very strong need to do everything on its own, the mother who has no time shouts at it and slaps it. This is not the right way to go through this crisis. This is because the child is likely to come out of the crisis with some negative consequences. For example, with the conclusion that no initiative goes unpunished.
The manifestation of the 3 years crisis is similar to the behavior of a teenager during the awkward age. Psychologists advise parents to consider this age inevitable changes that are necessary for development.
Well, I can say something else about why the first serious crises happen after the age of 3. This is because you still cannot communicate with children in a conventional manner. They don't know many words, so their response is very limited. While there are many conflict situations, there can be the same number of conflict situations today, but the child can't talk to you. They tell you something, and you receive a huge amount of positive emotions from them. It can even say that Varya, it has become much easier over the last year, from 4 to 5 years, much easier. I can even say that Varya has become my best friend. Well, I don't know what's coming next, though, and I'm expecting the crisis of the first grade in terror.
The relationship within a collective, encouraging success and reproaching failures. When a child goes to school, they appear in a completely new world with other values and rules. The most difficult thing a first grader has to face is appearing in the environment where their knowledge and skills are evaluated. Before that, their parents used to take them for what they were. In school, on the other hand, it is necessary to earn high marks to receive praise.
I saw how the first graders are treated in Israel. They don't write with their pens. They all write with pencils. They all have pencils with erasers, and they write. Well, any child can write something inaccurately or make a mistake. Even adults, like us, make mistakes. So there are no red pens and marks. The teacher just comes up and shows how it should be done. They erase it and write it anew properly.
Coming up, the awkward age. Is it really so terrifying for teenagers and their parents? Which social crisis emerged due to social media? Are there people out there who are happy about the occurrence of turning points in life? When a child goes to school, their social self begins to form. During this time, the support of parents is especially important. They must demonstrate that they love their child regardless of their successes at school. The crisis of 7 years age is relatively short. By the end of the first grade, children adapt to the new environment. After this begins the calm before the storm, before the teenage period. Okay, go ahead. Different things happen in life. Sometimes life sucks. It's terrible. Terrible. I don't know. I felt as if I knew everything. As if the whole world belonged to me. And at the same time, as if I knew nothing. Very strong mood swings. A lot of some new desires. Lots of different bad things, and good things. Just everything in the world happens during this period. Gleb is 18 years old now. His crisis of the awkward age ended very recently. Over several years of puberty, the young man faced most classic problems of this stage. Gleb gave up school, left the house, and became seriously interested in the rap culture. For several years, the young man barely set foot outside the recording studio where he was rapping his songs. Well, they were about me, about life, about girls. Mostly, they were like, I'm not a part of society, or something like that, about me being special, or that sort of thing.
This is called negations. This is when a child tells a parent, I can have my own world too. You had secrets from me, and now I have secrets from you too. And it is necessary to be cool about it. Try to get him talking about it. If the child becomes a part of a subculture, try to find out as much as possible about it. Find something good in it. Blur the line between you and them somehow.
From the point of view of physiology, the awkward age is the adjustment of reproductive function of the body. Thanks to sex hormones, boys and girls become men and women. The hormones launch the program of growing up. The appearance and behavior change. That is, if we talk about sex hormones before puberty, their level is basically close to zero. And if we consider the level of sex hormones in the body of an 18-year-old teenager, we can see the level of testosterone corresponding to the age of 27. That is, there are dozens. If we talk about values, there can be 20 or 30. When the time comes, the hypothalamus sends a signal to the sex glands indicating that it's time to start producing testosterone and estrogen. These hormones can be found both in the female and male body, but in different proportions. Testosterone, the male hormone, is mostly responsible for the behavior of teenage boys and girls alike. Testosterone is a hormone that determines ambitions, the behavior of a person, their purposefulness, and independence. Of course, girls have the same sex hormones as men, including testosterone. If we consider the influence of testosterone on the behavior of girls, then it is manifested in the same manner as with boys. That is, in the desire of being a leader, being ahead, and proving their point. Most parents expect the beginning of the awkward age of their children in terror. It is much more difficult to control a teenager than a child, and any prohibitions result in a protest.
Concerning behavior of the parents in this situation, as often as possible, say, I had it too. I've been through it. I used to run away, but I came back and realized there is no use in running away. That is, take the child's level. Don't drag the child to yourself. Anxiety of a child is increased, but why does it happen? This is nerve. This negation, this rebellion take place against a background of increased anxiety. Because the child understands everything, and they often hear, you used to be a little kid, and we were responsible for you. Now you're responsible for yourself.
By the end of puberty, the level of sex hormones reaches its peak. Their amount will remain the same approximately until the age of 30. By the age of 18 to 19, the body adapts to the changes. Finally, both parents and teenagers themselves can breathe out. The crisis of the awkward age is over. Yes, I've got good relations with my parents. After many fights and running away from home and everything in the world. But in the end, we've come to this understanding, and everything's good now. First of all, the puberty crisis is caused by changes occurring at the physiological level. The same cannot be said about the following turning period, the quarter-life crisis. It happens to a person at the age of 25 to 35 years. During this period, no significant changes take place in the body. I would like to attribute something real, to the real revision of what I've done and what I can do. This is because there is no physiology of a crisis yet. Like understanding. Yeah, there is no state of crisis yet. Okay, Sasha. Are you ready? For the shoot. Now we're... Hold on a little. Can we get this gingerbread man closer to you? Nikita is 32 years old. He's been a TV and cinema producer his whole life. 2 years ago, he decided to master a new profession and became a professional photographer. In his spare time, he takes pictures of his daughter, a diverse career, happiness in personal life. It seems that there are no objective reasons for this young man to be unhappy about his life. But in recent years, Nikita has been obsessed with the desire to change everything radically. And I even used to slip out. I used to slip out to leave, thinking that I'll take the family there. I used to spend several months in the USA, for example. Psychologists call such state the crisis of 30-year-olds. However, the people at the age of 20 have been recently experiencing it too. This crack in life is associated with revision of one's achievements. By the age of 30, many people have gained experience in professional and personal life, but aren't ready to decide on their priorities and desires yet. Such a person is constantly afraid that they would miss something.
Today's children, boys and girls, haven't seen calmness in many years. On the contrary, there's even more frustration. Have I taken the right way? Have I chosen the right profession? Do I make friends with the right people? Is it prestigious? In addition, there is the interference of availability of all those devices, the internet, social media, where we often forget that the person at the other side of the screen is just as vulnerable and that they have their own fears and anxiety just like we do.
According to specialists, the quarter-life crisis should not be considered a tough psychological challenge. Young people are still full of energy. They have powers and possibilities to change their lives if necessary. It is much more difficult to do so when you're 40. At this age, a person faces the universally known midlife crisis. When you're in your 40s, you start to look back rather intensively. I mean, perhaps I didn't have it before, but now it got to me somehow. And you understand that there are a lot of things that you haven't done. The things that you could have done with your abilities, but you didn't. And this is undoubtedly an uncomfortable psychological situation. Ilya Turevich is 41 years old. He has been working as a cameraman for 20 years. First, he worked on a federal channel news program, after which he started to make documentaries. Ilya is interested in his job and has no problems in his family. However, in recent years, he has faced dissatisfaction and the depressing feeling of disappointment with life.
These are fears. Why am I saying that the midlife crisis is an existential one? This is the crisis when a person understands that they are going downhill regardless of whether they want it or not. Well, not downhill, perhaps. It can be just a plain plateau, but soon they'll be going downhill. That is, a person understands clearly that there is less in front or ahead of him. I don't mean life itself, but rather active social life, than it is left behind.
Endocrinologists consider physiology, which in its turn causes the depressed psychological state, to be the main reason behind the midlife crisis. Again, sex hormones are to blame again. The decrease in testosterone level in men is a natural and irreversible process of body aging. Reduction of the amount of this hormone negatively affects libido and endurance of the body. The muscle mass is reduced, while the fatty tissue is increased. As a result, vitality is decreased. The peak production of testosterone in the male body occurs at the age of 27 years. From this age, the level of testosterone that a body can produce in its regular mode is gradually and constantly reduced. This value is quite high, about 1.5 to 2% per year. This is why, by the age of 40, a man faces with the possible lack of testosterone, the main component that forms his physiology and ensures the quality of recovery of physiological processes. Doctors offer hormone replacement therapy as a way to combat the midlife crisis. After the examination, the patient is offered to undergo the course for increasing the number of hormones to the level that they had during the peak of their physiological activity. That is, we can create a certain level of physiology, which will provide a person with their old condition, the one they've forgotten, the one they've lost. Psychologists don't consider the medicinal method to be the best way of fighting an age crisis. A patient who starts to take hormones will have to do it for the rest of their life, thus depriving themselves of the possibility to feel natural changes associated with age. Midlife crisis in women is primarily associated with a fade-out of the reproductive functions due to hormonal changes. Like at the awkward age, the hypothalamus sends a signal to the ovaries, but this time it serves to reduce the estrogen production, not to increase it. Due to a reduction in the level of this hormone, the functioning of the genital system changes. Follicles are no longer developed in the ovaries, and the eggs cease to ripen and ovulate.
I think that the midlife crisis certainly has its age boundaries if we go successfully through it. Firstly, because, let's take women for example. A woman gets into these age changes. They are novel for her, and she doesn't know how to deal with them. This is where anxiety, disappointment with the world, and suspicion towards her husband come from. But then the time comes, and she gets used to it. This is why people say that ladies of 45 then start them again. This is because this physiological period is basically over, and she gets used to it and starts to accept herself. Hello, Zinaida Belukina and director Alexander Rodin in the studio. You're listening to
A person who never had an age crisis. This is how journalist Zinaida Belukina calls herself. She is deputy director of a radio station and hosts 4 authors programs. However, Zinaida Nikolaevna never had spare time.
It's all very complicated because here doesn't just mean radio and TV. In fact, I have 51 years of creative experience. Here's teaching, here's science, here's editorial work, printed forms, and there's pure journalism.
It's hard to believe, but Zinaida Belukina is 70 years old. She sees the secret of her energy and optimism in never-ending activities and hobbies. The woman looks optimistically at turning points. First of all, an age crisis is a possibility to get to know one's own self.
Just don't think that there must be some crisis. What comes is not a crisis, but a kind of growing up. A crisis, one thing coming out of another, is development. And this is development. This is personal growth from zero, from having absolutely no biological, psychological, and physiological skills to perfection. I can't say, of course, that we become perfect when we grow old. But the ambition for perfection is the way we pass thanks to crises.
Physiological changes on the one hand and rethinking of life values on the other. Age crises take us by surprise, and it seems that our lives will never be the same. But perhaps we just need to change our attitude towards turning points and perceive them not as punishment, but rather as an incentive for development.